in this lab, we're going to try to go through all the things that Ryan talked about in his overview. We're going to define remote choice variables, remote catalog items. We're going to define remote tasks, provider to consumer and consumer to provider remote tasks. We're going to do a simple, an advanced, and a virtual transform. We're going to, you guys are going to register and connect your instances. And I'll tell you up front, I've gone through this lab a couple of times with blank instances and made sure everything worked, but I'm sure that we may have, I may have missed some stuff along the way. So if you find mistakes, let me know, and we'll update those in the master and make sure that things are better for our next boot camp. All right, so we debated as we were putting this lab together, we debated having you guys install the applications and go through that process. We decided that that wasn't great use of the time, but so we've got Service Bridge pre-installed. If you look on your provider instance, you will see that, and actually my favorites is not shown, but you'll see on your provider instance, you've got the Service Bridge for providers application, and then on your consumer instance, you've got Service Bridge for consumer application. So the applications are pre-installed. But a couple of things. So when you entitle these, and I've been through this a couple of times, I've had some customers complain. When you entitle these on the store, there are so many applications that come over that it takes a while for the entitlement to show up on your instance. So be patient when you entitle the application or a new version of Service Bridge application on the store. It may take a while to show up in your instance as an available application that you can install. So give that some time. The one thing that is a catch, it catches me all the time. We actually have a block now in the application that checks to make sure you have a global script include that you've installed. And that's the first direction here. We decided we'd leave this in because it is something that you forget a lot of times. So in order to implement the Service Bridge functionality in our application, there were changes that need to be made in the platform to allow those. And we're playing catch up with the family releases. So you may have the most current family release, but the platform changes necessary for Service Bridge aren't in that family release. And we'll continue to be in that mode as we develop new store functionality for our Service Bridge application. So there's always going to be, at least for the foreseeable future, a global script include that you will have to install after you install the Service Bridge applications, both on your provider instance and your consumer instance. And that is included in, it's detailed in a knowledge article, and I will, I'm going to paste into the chat the knowledge article. And I know you guys, if you can't copy the link, maybe you can just write down the knowledge article number. And in that knowledge article, it walks through exactly how to install the global script include. And the link for the script include, I'm putting that in there as well. Is anybody, let me ask and make sure this is the case. Can somebody come off mute, tell me for sure that you cannot copy the URL that I just pasted in?
You can copy and even click on the links.
You can click it, you can't copy it though.
Okay, gotcha. That's good to know. So I'll stop worrying about that. I misunderstood at the beginning when people were having issues. All right, so I'm going to, and I'm going slow on purpose so that everybody can stay with me. So I'm going to start with downloading the script include. Take that down to my desktop. And hopefully you guys are following along in your lab guide. So the first thing we need to do is delete any old script include. So on both instances, and you have to do this on both instances, I'm going to go to, if I can type, scripts background. And you're going to copy and paste the script from the lab guide. And then run that script. And we'll do this on both instances. That's going to delete any existing service bridge script include so that we can install the new one. Now we will install the new script include. So you go to script includes. You right click or click on the three dots on one of the column headers and do import XML. Choose the sb.xml file that you downloaded and then upload. And we'll do that on both instances. And then you want to just make sure you verify that it did load on each one. You can see it's on my provider instance. And on the consumer instance. And again, you've got to do that on both your provider and your consumer instances. Okay, so let's talk about key management framework, KMF, a minute. So some of you who are on, I know because I've talked to you, have had issues along the way with key management framework that we have used to pass to encrypt between the instances in Service Bridge. In the February instance of Service Bridge, we replaced KMF with a new encryption that we developed just for Service Bridge because we were having a lot of issues with getting KMF to function consistently. It's not always set up correctly on instances initially, but even with the new version of Service Bridge, where we're not using KMF ongoing for the encryption, out of the box, the OAuth secret that that's used for passing for encrypting is encrypted using KMF. So even with the new version of Service Bridge, we need to make sure that KMF is running correctly up front, just as a check, just to make sure that when we install Service Bridge, that initial OAuth secret can be decrypted successfully. So even with the new version where we're not using KMF ongoing, we still need to do this check just to make sure up front. So that's the next step, is to make sure that KMF is initialized and is running correctly. This is not something admin has access to up front, so we actually need to make sure that admin has the SN_KMF admin role. And the way we do that, and again, this needs to be done on both instances, is if you go to System Security Key Management Administration, you'll see from my screen, it comes up with a slush bucket and we just want to select System Administrator and give them that KMF role, move them over to the selected users and save. And I'm going to do that on both of my instances. All right, and note the message that comes up. So you change the role, but you have to log out and log back into your instance. So I'm going to log out. Both of my instances. And then you'll have to go back to your links, your instant links that you got to get back in. It does say that. So I will.
Hey, Phil.
Yep.
During this log out, log in thing, it's you can accomplish the same thing by simply impersonating any user and then ending that impersonation. It's a little bit quicker.
Great. That's good to know. Thank you.
Yep.
Quick question, Phil. Did anybody else get an error saying skipping record as they were uploading their XML?
I saw a few people had that. Did you run the background script first to delete the SB script include?
So Ryan, I tried to run it. I copied it in the box, but there's no run button or anything that allows me to execute that script. Am I supposed to type run before I copy it in?
No, for the background script, there should be an icon down at the bottom when we log back into the admin instance. Phil, actually, if you have yours up, if you just go into background scripts.
I'll go there. Yeah. So did you do an import XML for the delete? Yeah.
I
so
think
that's
I'm feeling
the
it's the first step. I think it's where we're cleaning up the instance. The
Yeah,
instructions
if you
say
go
to run the script.
If you go to scripts background, if you look at my screen,
I'm watching.
okay. You paste the script here and there's a run script button at the bottom.
Yeah, I hit that. It didn't do anything. All right, I'll try again.
Now that you've given that KMF admin role to the administrator, then we're going to go back to key management, and you'll see now where your key management framework just had that one option before. Now you have a bunch of options. One of the options is health diagnostics. So just run health diagnostics on both instances.
Now it worked.
And see that everything's running correctly. In the Cloud Lab instances, we've got this first one is disabled, so that's why it shows up disabled, but that's not an issue. And sometimes, depending on the instance, sometimes you've got to run it a couple of times to get it to work, especially if key management framework was not initialized when you go in, if it wasn't set up initially on the instance. All right, so let's talk about personas. You'll see how personas come into play later, but I create those up front because as we create remote catalog items, we will assign personas to those catalog items. And it's a way for you to allow some control over who can access catalog items on the consumer side. And we've got some very simple personas that we will create here. You can get as complex as you want. I think somebody asked before, is that something you should negotiate with your customers, and certainly something that should be discussed. You can talk to your customer about what kind of personas they might want to see on their side, create those. In this case, we're just creating two very simple ones. If you go to the catalog personas module under Service Bridge Provider Administration and click on New. And the first one we are creating is called Customer. And you guys can copy and paste all the additional text you see fit, just as long as it's something you can recognize. And that's all there is to it. So we've created a customer persona that the intent is that it'll just be given to all authorized users for basic access to catalog items. And then we'll create one that's differentiated. We'll call it customer admin. And it's just a way of differentiating who can access for maybe more restricted items. And that's it. Very simple. So two personas, customer and customer admin. Anybody have any questions or have any issues with that? All right. So we're going to move on to creating remote choice definitions, another kind of foundation thing that we will use in our remote catalog items. So remote choice definitions allow the creation of remote choice fields in your catalog items. So you'll see when we create the example, if you've created a catalog item for your consumer and you want that consumer to specify, maybe it's a server that needs attention or an application, remote choice fields allow them you to specify a variable that when they click on the pull down, they click on the remote choice field on their side, it will retrieve records from the provider instance to populate that remote choice field on their side. So it avoids you having to have them type in stuff that may be problematic, maybe error prone. It avoids the back and forth, right? They're going to be seeing in real time a list of the items that you want them to see in that remote choice list. And I don't know if that makes sense. You'll see how it works in a few minutes, and as we go through demonstrating how this works. We're going to create two. One is going to reference the CMDB CI printer table. So it would give the account the list of printers that are in the CMDB CI printer table for their account. And the other we'll create is for servers. So it would give them a list in that remote choice fields of what's in the CMDB CI server table for that account. We've got a few records in each one of those. So one thing about the remote choice, because you are enabling a consumer to access provider records, we do require that that you elevate to the security admin role when you're putting in those remote choice definitions. So the first thing you should do on your provider instance is to choose elevate role and elevate your role to security admin. And then we'll go to in the Service Bridge Provider application under administration, we'll go to remote choice definitions. And you'll see it's blank to begin with. The first one we're going to create will allow the consumer to see a list of printers that are supported for their account. So we'll do a new. The first thing it asks for is what table do you want to look at? What tables are those records going to come from? So we will type printer. Let's see, there's actually several. I'm going to choose the CMDB CI printer table. And I'll just call this one supported printers to make it more descriptive. And you'll see it puts up two security options. So Glide Record Secure, that uses ACLs. Any ACLs that are in place. This goes back to the question we had a little while ago. If you have that checked, it will use the ACLs. If it's unchecked, then it ignores the ACL restrictions.
Great. Yeah, that took it full circle on my question on ACLs. Thanks.
Yeah, so you have that option. The other account secure, just you would want that checked. It just makes sure that the consumer is only seeing things that are specific to their account company. If you have that unchecked, they would see anything in the table. So I leave that checked, and then you can add filter conditions. So you can be even more restrictive in what they see, and you have options within the table that you've specified that you can further restrict what the account is able to see. So you might have like a supported or unsupported field, or active or inactive field, and you might only want them to see active, and you could put that in the filter condition. That text in there, and then you save. And then once you've saved it, publish it. Okay. So that's the printer's remote choice field. Now we'll do one for servers. So the table is server. Actually, let's do it this way. And I'm seeing the performance delays that you guys are seeing as everybody's doing this stuff. So I guess that's a good reason for me to do it along with you. Okay. So you choose a server table, and I just call this supported servers. And again, we'll uncheck Glide Record Secure, leave account secure checked. And I'll put in the short description just to make it clear. And the same with the printers, we save it and we publish it. And that's remote choice. So let me stop there. You can go ahead and leave the security admin role after you create these, so you don't need that anymore. Let me stop there and see if anybody's has any questions or is having any issues along the way.
Can you talk about the Glide Records Secure once again? Sorry, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, so if Glide Record Secure is checked, then in addition to any conditions that you have here, it will use ACLs that you've defined to further restrict the data that the consumer can see. If you do not have Glide Record Secure checked, then it ignores any ACLs, and it only uses the either the account secure or the other conditions that you've specified for the remote choice variable.
So this is for the replication of data or user viewable of data. Like if I have a role and if I want to view the data, so
This is just for remote choice fields in the remote catalog item on the consumer side. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's replicating. Actually, I don't know how the data is carried over and displayed. Ryan, do you know, is the data actually replicated on the consumer instance?
It's not replicated, it's stored into a table. Basically, it's an API lookup. And so when they click on the consumer side and hit that drop down field for a reference, in the background, it queries an API, and the provider side gets the information and it sends back and then displays it. So basically, the ACL, it's to the it uses the permissions of the integration user that's created during the registration. And so essentially, based off of what access that has, will then restrict it to based off the ACLs. So it's something to call out as, not each individual user, it's for the integration user for that connection.
Right. So Phil, and run one question. So if I want to get a data from multiple tables by applying several filter conditions in this drop down, so is it possible using remote choice list?
So it's not possible with the condition builder. One of the things that we've been exploring is essentially using like a virtual table or remote table,
Right.
which would be querying, would basically have a query of multiple tables and could introduce more advanced scripting type functionality to essentially populate that remote table, which would then be queried by the API. So it wouldn't be using remote table for, basically would be like a virtual table where it's just using that table as a temporary storing location for these records. So not something that's there out of the box. More so, it's just these the conditions and the filters that can be put in there. But it's something that we've been exploring and potentially could be something as a potential way to do it in the future as an out of the box function.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I see Alistair's raised a hand. Do you need something?
Phil. Yeah, this might be a basic question, right? Because I'm in pre-sales and I detect there's a lot of engineers on this. But on this example, so I've got an MSP customer, which is why I've joined this. So on this example where, say, you've got printers or servers and we're trying to talk about who has access to something, would it be the case that you'd have to have a different table based on, I don't know, let's say the contract with the MSP is only to look after Brother on one customer and HP printers on another? Would that still be referencing the same table, and that would be controlled by visibility rules of some description, or would you have a completely different table here? As just a general question.
You wouldn't have a different table, but you could set up different remote choice definitions for the different customers,
right?
Different conditions.
Got you. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, it depends on how your company, how your printer table, your server table, whatever is set up. If you've only got Brother printers set up with an account, with that account in your CMDB, then you wouldn't have to put a condition. It would just show everything supported for that account.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, they wouldn't. That definitely wouldn't be the case. But yeah, I've got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, right. Just another example, you might have, one query might be going off of assets, and then it's only going to show the assets that are specific for that account. At the same time, if you're doing a lookup and you're looking off of some model table, those models are shared across all of the customers, and so it could be different filter condition and show all the models that are orderable based off of whatever the service is or whatever that request is going to be for.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. And sorry, I don't want to drag you down the rabbit hole, but yeah, thanks for that. Thank you.
That's okay. All right. All right. I'm just looking at the chat. I see, Kevin, I see your correction. I will get that corrected in the master. Appreciate that. I don't see anything else outstanding in chat. We've got a couple of outstanding questions. I think you answered Rahul's question. Or you're answering Rahul's question.
Yes.
I was just going to mark that as answer.
Chris, I'd have to go away and think about yours for a while. Let's see. what happens if you set up some transform? The X form line mappings are not one-to-one.
For that would be better for an advanced transform, is what you're saying. So I've seen that before where, on the provider side, they might have two states, that are represented by one state on the consumer side. And so an advanced transform would be better for that because there's a little bit of logic that might need to be put into that to say, all right, well, we don't want to, if it's in either one of those two states or equivalent, then we don't want to change it. Just leave it in one of those two states on the provider side. Whereas, if it changes back to that state, if it changes from something else to that state, we want it to go to, the first option in those two states on the provider side. So that would be more of an advanced transform. Otherwise, it'll just pick the first one, I think, numerically from the list, and probably going to have some situations where it's not going to work as expected.
Thank you.
All right. Cool. So obviously some of you guys are working ahead, which is fine. I'm going to keep chugging along for those of you who are slow like me. So we're going to move on to creating a remote catalog item. So if you've created your personas, you've created your remote choice definitions that you're going to use in your remote catalog items. So we're going to start creating the remote catalog items. First one is going to be report a printer issue. So if you go into Service Bridge Provider and choose remote catalog items, it'll bring up your remote catalog item list. We'll do new. And we'll call this report a printer issue. And you'll see that you've got warnings that you've got to have at least one variable and at least, and that because you haven't created a persona yet, that it can be accessed by any customer. And we will assign a persona in a second. So this is going to be report a printer issue. And then you specify flow. So there's a couple of out of the box flow. I will actually, let's just do it this way. Let's call it provider. So you see 3 here. So what the flow does is it, remember Ryan talked about provider tasks. When a consumer puts in a request on their side using one of your catalog items, it creates a provider task that gets synced over Service Bridge. So your provider instance is getting a provider task. You need to specify flow in your record producer. What do you want to happen to that provider task when it comes back to your provider instance? And you can create a case. You could create a change or you could create an incident out of the box. And you can define other flows as well. If you want to define a flow to do something else, and you can support anything that's extended from task here. So in this case, we're going to say when they report a printer issue, then we're going to create an incident on our provider instance. So that's the flow that I will choose for this one. And then we're going to specify a persona. So this is one maybe we want everybody to access. So we're going to specify that this will be accessible by the customer persona. Okay. And then we will save. And once you save, then we get our related list at the bottom. So the first thing we need to put in is the variables. What do we want? What data do we want to collect on the consumer side? What data do we want to get back? So we go to the variables related list and you choose new. Let's go back to variables. And the first thing we're going to create in our variables is we're going to use that remote choice field that we created for printers. So the way you set up a remote choice field is you choose, and you can see you've got a lot of different choices for the type of variables that you can use here. For a remote choice field, you want to choose reference. So we're going to choose reference field, and you'll see that brings up a box, remote choice enabled. We want to check that box. We'll say that this is going to be a mandatory field. So that says, do they have to enter it or not? And we're going to say, yes, they do have to enter this data. And we'll say this is the first thing that we want. So the order, first thing we want to see in the list. And you can use whatever index you want to use. I just use 1, 2, 3 here. Okay. Then you have to specify what question you want the user to be asked in their item. And you can see those in the lab guide. I'm just saying, please select the printer experiencing the issue, and then you can put whatever name. For that question. Okay. Now for normal variables, that's enough. For remote choice variables, we then need to go to type specifications. And this is where you specify what your remote choice definition is that you're going to use. So in the remote choice definition box, if you click on it, it'll bring up the two that we created. We created one for supported printers and one for supported servers. So for this one, we'll choose supported printers. And this is where the two variables that Ryan was talking about previously come in. You can choose two variables from the record that you want to display on the consumer side. And for the lab, I just said we're going to display the name of the printer. So if you go down to the name field, and then whatever else, I chose manufacturer. You can choose model number, anything that's in the table, right? Okay. And that's it for that variable. So then you submit. Okay. Now, if you go back down to the variables list, we're going to enter a couple more variables. The first one is going to be the short description that we want to display. And so you notice this map to field here. If you choose map to field, then it will map what the user enters into a field in the provider task record and into your tasks that you create. So short descriptions are ones that we want to be transferred to the task. So we're going to do map to field for this one. It's just a single line of text, so we don't need to change that. We'll say we want it to be, this will be the second in the list, and it's going to be mandatory as well. And the field that we're going to choose, since we're mapping to a field, is going to be short description. So you just choose that for the field. And then we need to put in the question that we're going to ask. And we will copy and paste from the lab guide again, provide a short description of the issue. And because we're mapping to a field, the field name's already data field for you. And that's it for that variable. And then the last variable we'll put in is description. We'll map that one to a field as well. Instead of single line of text, this one will be multi-line text. We'll say that's going to be third in the list. It's going to be mandatory. And the field that we're going to choose from the pull down is description. And then copy and paste the question in, and it's already data filled because we're mapping to a field, the name, and we submit that one. And those are the variables for this remote catalog item. So I'm going to stop there because that was a lot to go through. Anybody have any questions or having any issues with getting your variables created?
Nope, I'm just completing it.
Okay. We'll give everybody another second to catch up.
When you
Hey,
created the
Phil,
first,
quick question.
sorry, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
On the workflow that you selected for the remote record producer, you had said something about as long as it goes against task. Up above in this remote record producer.
Oh, sorry, I went to the wrong place. Yes, so we support anything, the flows support anything provider task to any other task type.
Got it. Okay.
So anything that's extended from task.
So it has to. So when a provider task is created on the producer side, it's going to kick off a flow that creates some other record on the producer instance, and that record has to be an extension of a task table.
You're close. So the producer is actually going to be the consumer in this, because we're publishing a catalog item to the consumer instance. So it's going to kick off by the consumer choosing one of the catalog items and entering information.
Mm-hmm.
And when the consumer does that, it creates a provider task on the consumer instance.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets passed over Service Bridge to the provider instance.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the provider instance, that's what this flow is saying. It's saying, when we get this provider task, we're going to create an instance, or we're going to create a case, or we're going to create a change, or some other task type.
Got it. And it always has to be some type of task type.
That is my understanding. Ryan, is that correct?
Technically you wouldn't have to. I mean, really, it's a flow that's going to go and create it. So, I mean, what the records afterwards, and if you explore that flow, and these flows really are set as templates, you could then use that and go ahead and map it. You'll see that on the provider record itself, or the provider task itself, at the end of this flow, it will go ahead and populate the parent field. So, I mean, technically you could have it just do whatever and then manually put in your own flows or what you want to then move that provider task into like a completed state.
Got it.
And drive
Okay.
it that way. So technically,
just like so just kind of something silly, right? If I wanted that flow to make an API call to an external system and then update the provider task, I could, right? I wouldn't have to create an incident or a case or a change.
you could. It's looking for a parent record though, to that then it's going to mirror the state off of. So you would have to account for that process essentially.
Okay. Got it.
Understood. There. So I mean, what would probably be better, if you have some type of automation, is to map it out to like a catalog item or something along those lines, which then drives that, and then it could synchronize to like the rhythm, the requested item, and then synchronize off of the state of that, because the provider task is looking for that parent task. So technically, you could not do it, but you're going to have additional work that you're going to have to do, because the Service Bridge flow is expecting there to be a task as a parent, which it then replicates the additional comments and the state as well. So if that was not there, it'd pretty much have to go into like an immediate closed state directly after that. Otherwise, you're going to run into issues, and you'd have to, you would have work that you'd have to do to customize it.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
All good.
I have one question. When we created the first variable as a type reference, there was a checkbox for remote choice enabled. We set that to true. What would happen if you set that to false, that remote choice enable field?
It would look at the table, the reference table that's there on the customer side. So if you set it up as a reference field and say, it's going to look at the user table, as an example, it would see all of the users that's on the customer instance. They could select it. It would then come across, but it would come across as like a sysid, which if would work fine if you already had replication of data and had similar sysids on the other side. You could then use that as an object, but it would probably not be as helpful as having a remote choice if you don't have a rich object on there.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. All right. So we've created variables. The other requirement for catalog item is specifying who's going to see it. Like who's going to be able to, which one of your connected customers is going to be able to see this catalog item. So we enable that control through consumer criterias. If you're on for Ryan's overview, he went through and talked about consumer criteria. In this case, for the lab, we're going to create a consumer criteria that we'll use throughout the lab. So you do a new, and then we'll click on the magnifying glass. So we'll bring that dialog up and do a new customer condition. And in this case, we'll just call this this condition Solana customer. So is it a Solana customer? And we'll condition based on the account. And we're going to look in the sold product table. And the customer field will be account. So this is a very simple one. It says if the account appears in the sold product table, they bought a product from us, then they will be able to see this catalog item. But as Ryan described when he went through it, there's a lot of options here. You can choose different fields, you can choose different tables, you can add filter conditions. So you could potentially have customer criteria for each one of your offerings. You could have specific customer criteria for specific segments of customers. So there's a lot of flexibility in creating the customer conditions. And I think they've actually just updated the product documentation for this, not recently, because I don't think it was well described before. So it goes into a lot more in the docs as to how to set up these criteria.
And Phil, while we're on this, just one thing I would note on here is actually if you in this window, if you go to condition on and maybe just select account or company, I just wanted to point one thing on the condition on table instead of sold product.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, select account or company there. Yep. Now, one account and company, and this is something that's you'll see that field, the field to condition on, it no longer has that is shown up, and so you really don't want to use account or company, because as I had in that with the one slide, it adds in an implicit account equals whatever the account is for the connection. With account or company, that is not there, so it's not going to have that condition built into it that the account equals the account of the connection. So you will find that if you try to do it from here, it'll most likely wind up entitling whatever record that's for to all of the different companies that are connected. So just to call that out, because that customer field disappears. So if you, one thing that we've been using just for, any number of tables you could use, but one thing that we've been using just while doing testing with Service Bridge, if there's the Service Bridge connection table. So that one, there's going to be one connection per customer, because that's just how Service Bridge operates. And so if you were to look at that record, you would know that there's going to be only, one record that's going to be found. And so you could use that as a table to trigger off of to identify one specific customer.
Okay, so using this is bad from the point of view of all accounts would have access.
If you use the account or company table
Okay.
as the table to condition on, so avoid those.
In this case, we're saying this customer account equal the account in the sold products table, an account in the sold products table. And it would only show for those accounts. And we made sure that Boxio, our consumer, appears in the sold product table, so it works for the lab.
Is this something that maybe a friendly warning should be put up for? Brian, when you select that account or company?
I think they've looked at it. I feel though that this condition portion right here is a platform capability, and so it's not added as of yet. You know, the consumer criteria portion right here is specific to Service Bridge, but building that actual condition portion is something that's a platform wide,
Right.
so it's used in a multitude of other products.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you notice when I click on the magnifying glass, it goes from talking about consumer criteria to customer conditions. The customer conditions is the platform piece that we're
Exactly.
using. Okay, so after you create that consumer criteria, it data fields, and we submit again to submit that consumer criteria as part of the remote catalog item. Once you have your variables and your consumer criteria, then you'll see you're given the publish option for your remote record producer, and then we will publish. And we see we should have that as in our remote record producer table. So we're also going to create one for submit a server change request, and we'll go through the very same things. Just to be repetitive here. So we're going to create another one called submit a server change request. And this is an option. This is an example of a different task type. So we will submit a server change request. And notice the flow that we use here instead of where we use create incident for provider task before. Now we're going to create a change from the provider task. And because you might not want everybody to be able to create a change, just to be different, we will specify the customer admin persona for this one. And we'll save. And then as with the other one, we'll start creating our variables. The first one again is going to be a reference field that we will use to refer to our remote choice. So remote choice is enabled. We'll make it mandatory. We'll say the order is 1.
I have a question.
Yes.
These flows that we see here, are they out of the box or are they just in the instance for the lab?
They are out of the box.
Okay.
So those 3, incident, case, and change, are all out of the box.
Okay, but because I see many more.
Yeah, those are all workflows that are defined on the instance. So, and
okay.
those, like you can
The
see,
service bridge ones are just 3 of them. Okay.
yeah, some of them are just installed as part of demos with
Yeah, okay. No.
Yeah, when you click on the flow selector for a remote record producer, it will show any flow that's there. There's 3 of them specifically, as Phil has mentioned. It says, you know, create incident change, or is it a case? Okay. It says from provider task, and so it's, you know, if you do a star, you know, from provider task, you'll see the 3 that are there, and those can be used as templates to create additional ones as well. but it will show any flow essentially that comes up, and so you just need to select the appropriate one so that you can define additional ones custom and select those as well.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks.
And then we go into type specifications again, and we choose one of our remote choice definitions. We'll choose supported servers in this case.
Hey, Phil, was this one for multi-line or single line text?
So this is a reference field for the remote choice.
Okay. Got, oh yeah, yeah. Got it.
Yep. All right. And then for our remote choice display fields, I'll choose name again. And choose operating system and for this one. And then once you've done that, you submit that variable, and that's your remote choice variable that's going to give them a list of supported printers. And then just the same as with the other one, we'll go in and we'll put the short description and description in. So we'll map to the field again. We'll make it mandatory. We'll make it number 2. And we'll map to short description. And then in our question, copy and paste from the lab. Then so that's short description, and then we'll put in description as well. This is your multi-line text. Ken.
Okay. Hey, I got a little behind. Okay, so I'm at variable new record reference. Could you back up a couple of clicks? You were going slow before, but then you started speeding.
Yeah, I figured we'd done this one before. I could speed up a little bit.
Too many screens up. I have to take down some of my tabs.
All right. Okay, so we'll just start this one over. We'll leave. All right, so you made it through short description.
Let's see. I'm at variable new record reference catalog item. Catalog item would be, would that still be what's the catalog item?
Which are you creating variables?
Yeah. Right now, yeah, variable new record.
So which have you created any variables?
Oh yeah, I've created report, printer issue, that sort of thing. So the last thing you were at was let's see, select the server. Let's see. Yeah, I've already have that. And okay. I'm actually caught up.
So you've got select the server and short description.
Select the server and short description. Let's see here. Okay, hold on for a moment here. Variable. Now I've got to go ahead and do that one now. Okay.
Okay. So do new, and then
Name is select.
you map the field, single line text. Order is 2. You're mapping to the field short description.
Mm-hmm.
And then put your question in, and then submit.
Okay.
All right, and then last variable. We'll map to field. It'll be multi-line text. So that's third in the list. It's going to be mandatory as well. And the field that we're going to map to is description. And then put your question in. And that's it for the variables for select a server, for submit a server change request. All right, so we've got our variables in for this one. We've got to put consumer criteria in for this catalog item as well. So click on consumer criteria and then new. And we'll use the same consumer criteria that we used before. Solana customer that you just created. And then submit. And then once you have your variables and your consumer criteria, then you can publish. All right. So now we have two remote catalog items. Submit a server change request and report a printer issue.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, please.
I'm assuming that there's going to be at some point something on the consumer side when you're registering the consumer to say, this is who I am. This is, I'm Solana, so that Service Bridge knows to publish these remote record producers down.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get to that after we get all the setup done on the provider side. And to be clear on, as we're setting these up, the provider is Solana. And you'll see when we get to the consumer side, the consumer is Boxio. So provider Solana, consumers Boxio. Just
Sorry
to keep it straight. That's okay.
Creating confusion. Yeah. Okay.
No, that's fine.
Not to jump ahead, but that would be the authorized users, right? When you're doing the consumer registration from the consumer instance. That's like how it'll.
That's one of the pieces of setting up the consumer piece.
That's how it'll know that this is Solana, right? It'll be like, oh, here's the authorized users. They're part of the Solana company, and then they'll be able to access these.
I hold the question until we get to the registration.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
When you do the registration, you have to identify what the provider is and what the consumer is. The authorized users comes after. So the authorized users piece doesn't really have anything to do with it recognizing the company.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Given the time, I think I'm going to go ahead and jump into remote task definitions. Now, remote task definitions can get tedious because you're entering a lot. So once we get it created and we start putting in fields, you may want to focus on your lab guide and getting those done. But I think I'd want to do that before we take another break. My intent is, well, this is scheduled for another hour and 10 minutes. My intent is that we will get to the point of registering our instances. And that's where we'll end today. And then tomorrow we'll start up with actually taking what you've done so far and demonstrating some of the capabilities so you can see in how it works. And that's what we'll start with in the morning. So I want to kind of crack on. And for those of you that are ahead, you can multitask or take a break if you need to. But I want to keep going so we make sure we get to that registration piece if possible. If not, it's not a big deal. We'll do it tomorrow. So we're going to do create remote task definitions now. If you remember from Ryan's presentation, remote tasks, it's another table type that's installed by Service Bridge, a remote task table, and it allows you to pass tasks from the consumer to the provider and from the provider to the consumer. So if you have an incident on the consumer side and you find it's within the provider scope, you can kick off a remote task that, and it would go over Service Bridge and would open a task type on the provider side. So incident on the consumer might open a case on the provider side, or vice versa. So again, you have the options of the different task types on either side, and remote task is what's used to pass that information. So what we're going to do is set up these remote task definition, a remote task definition. And in that definition, you will define, first of all, what you want to happen. You want to go from a case to an incident, or from an incident to a case. Like, what are you going to, what's the task type going to be on each side? And then you're going to define what fields do you want to pass. What are the inbound fields and what are the outbound fields? Think of it as playing catch. So if we're on the provider side and we're talking inbound fields, those are the fields that are being sent from the consumer. They're fields that you're catching. We look at outbound fields, those are the fields you're sending to the consumer. So those are the fields you're throwing. When we look at the consumer, it's reverse, right? So the outbound fields for the provider are going to be the inbound fields for the consumer, and the inbound fields for the provider are going to be the outbound fields for the consumer. So don't let that confuse you. So we're going to define what fields we're going to synchronize, and when we're going to synchronize them. You'll see you can synchronize at insert. So you can say, when I insert this, that's when I'll synchronize, and that's the only time. Or are you going to do it when you on update as well? So insert and update. So am I going to synchronize it when I insert and when it updates or not? So you'll see that. And as I was saying that, I recognized that we have a whole nother section on transforms. So I don't think we'll get to the registration today. Maybe that's where we'll start tomorrow. But Chris asked a question about transforms previously. We'll talk about transforms and transforming data during that pass. So we recognize that sometimes field names don't match up and field types don't match up, those kind of things. And we have options for transforming the data as it's being passed between the two. And you'll see how that works after we get these remote task definition, this remote task definition set up. So it starts with going to Service Bridge Provider remote task definitions. And clicking New. And we will call our remote task definition case to incident. And I'm saying that from a perspective of a provider, where provider case to consumer incident. And so you start with defining what tables you're going to use. And so we're case to incident. So on the provider side, it's going to be the case table. And on the consumer side, it's going to be the incident table. And then I'll just copy and paste the description, short description for completeness here. And then it's, you can save. I usually do right click and save so it doesn't leave the record. But once you save, you'll see the related links show up below. And this is where we start defining fields. And this is what I was talking about. It can get a little tedious. If you go down in the lab guide, you'll see there are, I think 4 or 5 inbound fields that we're going to create. And again, these are fields that we expect to be coming from the consumer instance. So we'll go to inbound fields and we'll do a new. The first field that we're going to define is short description. And we've already pointed out to the dev team they need to do like we've done on some of the other forms and put a proposed name in for us. I think that's coming in a future release, but for now you've got to type the field name in. I'm going to extend the max length to 80 just in case somebody gets verbose. And sync when we're only going to sync the the short description on insert, because that's not likely to change along the way after you get the first insert. And then you need to select the field mapping. So in the incident table, the field that we're going to map is short description. And on the case table, again, same short description. So we're mapping directly short description and short description. And then submit. And then we'll do we'll do the description field. Same thing. Field name is description. We'll make the max length a little bit more for this one. We'll give it 1,000 characters just in case. Description may change. In this case, I've said for description, we're going to sync it on insert or update. So anytime it's updated, it'll be synced. And then the source mapping is description, and the target mapping is description. The next field we'll add is state. Field name is state. We'll leave the max length alone, and state will definitely change. So we will make it sync on insert or update. And the source mapping field is state, and the target field is state.
I am a little bit ahead, but it's the same step. So for the outbound field, the state, the sync when is only on insert. Is that just a mistake in the guide? The state only syncs on insert with outbound fields?
No, the guide says insert or update for state.
That's the inbound version. The outbound,
Oh,
the outbound field state, it only says insert. I thought it was just like an oversight.
yeah, I think that's an error. It should be insert or update.
Okay.
Hey, Phil, I don't know if we have really gone into much depth on the insert or the sync when yet, or do we want to hold off on that until we get there a little bit later?
I mean, I just said it was whether it syncs just when it inserts the record originally or initially, or whether it's on every update.
Yeah, which I think just like diving into that a little bit deeper, it gives a lot of capabilities, with saying when to sync when, even the never, because all of this information, as we looked at that remote task structure underneath, there's a remote task record that sits underneath that destination record. Call the parent is an incident, and then there's a remote task that's a child of that. And so you can send over a whole bunch of variables, as outbound variables, and set to a sync when of never. And so that means that data will be there, within the variable on the remote task, but it's not going to sync up to the parent incident. So now that allows you to send over a whole bunch of data, or to collect a whole bunch of data that then you could use, advanced transforms, or you could use a flow, or you could use different things to process that information. And if you think about it as a provider, you might not want to let the customer update the state. Maybe you have particular processes, whatever else it might be, and that could impact your SLA. You could take back their state, with a sync when of never. So now you'll know, hey, the customer changed the state on their side, but maybe you don't want it to change the state on your side, except for, a few situations. Maybe if they close it out, maybe you want them to say, okay, we're going to close it out too. And so you could use an advanced transform to go ahead and do that. Or maybe you just, you don't want the priority to change, let's say, because that's going to impact SLA. So maybe it's going to pop up a notice. You can use a script or an alert, or send out a message to say, hey, the customer changed this to a priority 1, but we're not going to allow that to change it automatically on our ticket. It's just going to maybe send a notification to whoever's assigned to it to let them know that the customer did that. So a lot of use cases where you can do things, on insert, update, or never, where it's can be some interesting things that you can do with it.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Yeah, well, and while Ryan was talking, it occurred to me. So one thing I should point out is, and you'll see when we get to the consumer piece, and we'll log into the consumer instance after registration, you'll see that the inbound fields and outbound fields get auto-populated on the consumer side when they accept the remote task. They have the opportunity to modify those and transform those on their side as well. But we'll see that when we get to the consumer piece. All right, I made it as far as state. Let's do the final ones. So the next one is contact. And we will do that one. Just don't insert. The source field is caller. And the target field is contact. And then the final one is a different one that you'll see. That is going to be a virtual field. So there, and Ryan may want to go into more depth on this, but there is the occasion where you will have a field that exists on either the consumer instance or the provider instance, and that field does not exist on the opposite instance. So in the case of virtual inbound, we are receiving a field from the consumer on the provider side. That field does not exist on the provider side. But we want to take it and do something with it on the provider side. I don't have this example in the use cases, but an example might be we're getting the caller street, caller city, caller address, or the caller state. We're getting those from the consumer instance, but those don't exist on the provider side for whatever reason. And we want to create a new field called caller address. So we can actually get those as virtual inbound fields and then have a script that creates caller address by combining all three of those and creates a new field on the provider instance. So it's a way to bring in fields to the instance or send fields that don't exist on the opposite instance. And so that's what we're creating a virtual inbound field. I'm just calling it virtual inbound field because I wasn't very creative, to show you how you can bring in data and create a new field on the provider instance. Ryan, you want to do anything that's more eloquent than that with virtual fields? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, virtual fields. I mean, this is a way to process information, more advanced sources where if you want to get information from multiple different tables, multiple different locations, maybe things that can't be dot walked. And there was ways to kind of fake around this previously, but it opens up the possibilities of where you want to get information from. Of where you can now look things up that aren't a direct dot walk. So it's kind of was talking about with some of the never type capabilities. It just opens up additional use cases because it's all going to be scripted. It doesn't need to you don't need to define a source of where it's coming from, and just allows you to use other capabilities of the platform, scripting within there that can pull information to go ahead and send this to send over.
Yeah, and this will get more clear when we create transforms, because there will need to be a transform for this field that corresponds with this field that actually does something with it. So you'll see it when we get there. So we're really creating this virtual inbound field to as part of the transform that we'll have in a few minutes. And you'll notice when I click on the virtual, the mappings go away because there's nothing to map to. All right. So you've got short description, contact description, virtual inbound field, and state. Those are your inbound fields. So now let's create the outbound fields, things we want to send. Short description. Update the max length on that. And we'll say insert. Same with the mappings. Description field. Do that on insert or update. State. And I don't remember who pointed this out, but just to remind you, there is an error for state. So the sync when for state should be insert or update, not just insert. So if you've gotten ahead of things and you didn't before we found that error, go back to your outbound fields in this remote task definition and change sync when on state to insert or update. And that's it for the outbound field. So we're only passing 3 things back: short description, description, and state. And remember, you can define and sync as many fields as you see fit or as necessary. So once you do the inbound fields and outbound fields, and you've got to have at least one of each to create a remote task definition, then just like with remote catalogs, we need to define the consumer criteria. And we will use the same consumer criteria that we used previously. The Solana customer. So you select that and submit. And we are done with our remote task definition. We've got inbound fields, we've got outbound fields, we've got consumer criteria. So we can publish. All right, that one took a while to get through, but let me stop there and see if anybody has any questions before we move on to transforms.
Yeah, I had already moved on to transform, but quick question. You said insert and update. What was that again? For outbound?
In your outbound fields,
Yeah.
state should be insert or update, not just insert. That was an error in the lab guide.
Oh, okay. Insert and update. Okay.
If we've already passed that, do we need to delete it and re-add it? Because it's grayed out when I go back to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you have to edit it. So you edit it, and then you can actually, oh, it's off my screen. So if you go back in there, then you can change it. But then after you change it, you've got to republish it after you save it.
Yeah, it's weird. It won't let me edit.
Yeah, same here.
Huh. Oh, have you guys?
Yeah, we've already
Yeah,
acted.
you've already published. So don't worry about it. It just means something later may not work, and when we demonstrate, you may not be able to see the state change on the consumer side. But yeah, if you've already registered, then it's a little more complicated to.
Well, I could retire it and create it again.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's not that important.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So the idea transforms. So we know that everything's not going to be the same on the provider side and the consumer side. Consumers use different fields. They may have different process. Something that is considered open on the provider instance may be in progress on the consumer side, which is one of our examples. So you need a way to transform data as it gets passed back and forth as a part of a remote task. And that's what transforms allow. And there are three types of transforms. There's a simple transform that is just field name to field name or value to value mapping. There's an advanced transform that is script based. So if it's more complicated, if there are different things that need to be considered, if you're combining variables, all kinds of things you can do with an advanced transform, you specify script to transform the data. And then the last is a virtual transform, where it can be virtual inbound or virtual outbound. So virtual inbound is the field doesn't exist on the provider side. In this case, because we're in the provider, it's inbound, doesn't exist, or virtual outbound. It doesn't exist on the consumer side. And we're gonna create one of each. So it starts with going to the transforms module under Service Bridge Provider Administration. And the first thing we're going to create is the simple transform. So you choose new. The company, the consumer that we're dealing with is Boxio, and I don't think we've entered that before. So we're going to say Boxio is the company that this transform is going to apply to. So message there is it's typically a company by company thing, but recognize there is an all companies box. So if you recognize there's some transform that maybe the provider is doing something totally different than standard, and maybe they want to choose all companies. So the transform takes place for any company that's connected. In this case, we're going to leave that unchecked. And this is a simple transform. And we want it to be both an inbound and an outbound transform. So we're going to choose inbound and outbound. And we are going to transform in this first one, the simple transform. We're going to transform the state field. So on the provider side, remember case is what we're using on the provider side, and the field is state. And on the consumer side, we're transforming to the incident table, and the field is state. And then we'll do a save. All right, so we've created our transform. Now, how are we going to transform? So what are the transform lines? So you go down to the transform lines list down below, and we'll do new. And this one can get tedious. So again, if you haven't gone through it already, focus on the lab guide, and we just got all the different states of all the different state possibilities. And so the first one is new. Open. This is one of the ones we're going to transform. So on the provider side, open. On the consumer side is going to be in progress, and you'll see that at play. Another transform that I don't think we see in the demonstration, but awaiting info on the provider side is on hold on the consumer side. So you get an idea for the kind of transformation you can put in place. All right. So we have all our values in. That is our simple transform. Once all those are in, then you choose activate. Okay. We go back to our transform list. Now we'll create an advanced transform. So you just choose new. We'll be choosing Boxio again. In this case, for the advanced transform, we'll just do inbound only. And in the type, you choose advanced. And then I have just a sample script. All this transform is doing, just as an example, and you excuse my poor scripting capabilities, but all I'm doing is taking the contact from the consumer, and I'm creating on the provider side a contact record, because when you get that in from the consumer, that may not exist. So I'm creating a contact record on insert and populating the caller field. So table is case. The field is contact. And I said that backwards. I'm taking caller information and populating the contact field. Got those backwards. And then the consumer is incident. And the field is caller. And you can, in the script, you're just copying the script directly from the lab guide. And you can put it after the what's there. You can replace what's there with it. And we'll save. And then once it's saved, we'll activate. And that's the advanced transform. And then the last one we'll put in is the virtual transform that goes with the virtual inbound field that we created. Boxio is the company again. It's going to be inbound, and the type is virtual inbound. And in this case, we're just specifying a script. Very simple, silly little script. All I'm doing, just as a simple example, is we are writing to that. We're going to write to that virtual inbound, or that virtual field that we created, a label and a value. And you'll see that in the work notes in the example. But recognize that, so you've got that virtual inbound field. You can take any fields that you're receiving. Remember, Ryan talked about specifying a sync when of never. So you're not really syncing anything, but you're receiving all those fields from the consumer instance. So consider that you could take those fields and then have a script that does something with them, creates a new field on the provider side that you then do something with. And that is your virtual inbound transform. Okay, so common mistake. I've done this, I don't know how many times. See, I got an invalid insert, that it's a duplicate. The reason I got that is because I forgot to put what my inbound field was. So it's looking at that and it's saying, oh, you've already got a transform for Boxio. So if I go in and I now correctly specify the inbound field, the virtual inbound field that I created as the inbound field that I'm getting, then submit, then it should submit okay.
Is anyone else getting stuck here because even though I've created the virtual inbound field, I don't have it as a reference?
Yeah, even I don't get it as a reference.
Well, I confirmed it's created when we created the remote task definitions.
Yeah,
I had the same issue. I had to go back to the virtual field creation and set an actual target field or source field, one of the two, but I had to set one of those in order for it to show up here. It wasn't in the guide.
All right, let's go back. Anybody else besides you, these three having the issue? Okay. All right, I'll tell you what, this takes us down. Did I activate that? I'm sorry. I don't know if I activated it or not. No, I didn't. So make sure you activate your transforms.